Welcome everybody. This is the very first match of the Inter-University Law Debate Tournament edition 2024, 7th edition. We have two teams today. I will give the floor to my colleague who will be the host for this match, Ms. Urbanova.
Thank you, Mr. Lavange, and really welcome to the debate team from University of Antioquia, who's a returning university participant from last year. And also welcome to Monash University debate team who are participating for the first time in this edition. And of course, welcome to the honorable judges that will be joining in the session through the live stream. And of course, to the audience joining us as well through the YouTube. For today's debate match, we are opening the Hague Inter-University Law Debate Tournament Edition 2024, 7th edition. The debate statement for the two teams today is that stricter enforcement of human rights in sports may impede the autonomy of sports organizations. The two teams received the topic 7 days before today's match, following the rules, and they have prepared for both sides of the argument. But before we go into the debate itself, it is time to introduce the debaters today a bit. So starting with the debate team of University of Antioquia, Ms. Melissa Ordóñez, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good evening to everyone. My name is Melissa Ordóñez. I'm a law student at the University of Antioquia in Colombia, and I'm thrilled to be here with all of you and sincerely appreciate this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you and welcome. Joining us from Monash University, Mr. Law.
Hi everyone. My name is Joel. Very happy to be here.
Right. Thank you and welcome. From University of Antioquia, Ms. Valeria Cecilia Romero Vasquez.
Thank you. Welcome everyone. I'm so happy to be here today, and I feel so grateful to have this opportunity, and wishing luck to all of yours.
Thank you and welcome. And joining us from Monash University as well, completing their team, Mr. Tan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I wish everyone the best of luck. Happy debating.
Thank you and welcome. Completing the team from University of Antioquia, Ms. Michelle Barbosa.
Good afternoon from Colombia. I am Michelle Barbosa, and I am a law student from the University of Antioquia, and it's an honor representing our university.
Welcome. So, for the allocation of the positions, I will share my screen shortly, and through the randomizer we use, you will see in a minute which debate position you will be sharing for this debate. So if I can just ask that you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So as you can see, we have two positions for each team that are a possibility. So two positions in favor for Monash University or in favor for the debating from University of Antioquia, as well as for the against position. So starting the wheel now. Right, for the purposes of this match, the debate position against will be represented by the debate team of University of Antioquia. My colleague will clarify the statement in just a second.
Yes, so it means that the position in favor will be, I would say, in the hands of Monash University in Australia. Concretely, it means the position in favor defended, and as well it will be the start of this debate by Monash University, would be stricter enforcement of human rights in sports may impede the autonomy of sports organization, so that is Monash University, and on the side of University of Antioquia. The University of Antioquia will be defending that stricter enforcement of human rights does not impede the autonomy of sports organization.
All right. In a minute, you will have 5 minutes to proceed and to finalize your preparation of the positions. So you will see the timer, you can close your cameras, and you can proceed to preparing. Right, thank you very much. So the time for preparation is now over. We'll be entering the match directly. So once again, for the debate statement on the subject that stricter enforcement of human rights in sports may impede the autonomy of sports organizations, the debate team of Monash University will be starting with position in favor. A reminder also for everyone watching, the yellow card marks 30 seconds left of the speaking time. The red card marks that the speaking time is now over. The debate team of Monash University, you now have 4 minutes for your opening statement. The timer will start whenever you start speaking.
Good evening, honoured judges, organisers, and my learned friends from the University of Antioquia. Sporting organisations need to strike a balance between a number of competing claims. Shareholders, athletes, workers, organisers, officials, managers, owners, and national identity. Enforcement of human rights necessarily means prejudicing one of these groups over another. These organisations have a right to freely adjudicate these balances of interests within the strictly defined laws of their jurisdiction. Today we will put forth one argument in defence of the autonomy of sporting organisations, that stricter enforcement of human rights measures will directly impede the ability of these organisations to function, thereby restricting their autonomy. Please note that due to the wording of may in the motion, that even if you think that these conclusions are not probable, but in fact possible, then you should still side with Team Affirmative. The reality is, any mechanism of enforcing human rights necessarily constrains sports organisations. For example, suing for damages on behalf of migrant workers injured in the construction of a stadium, or athletes grouping together in a class action claim for forced doping, can lead to financial consequences for these sporting organisations. You could sue within the domestic jurisdiction for breach of contracts or negligence if it is recognised. If human rights charters exist within that domestic jurisdiction, like we see in countries such as Australia and Canada, that is also an avenue for suing a sporting organisation. You could sue directly through that domestic organisation or an international sporting body if it is consented to that jurisdiction. Even if you sue indirectly through by suing the state that you are in or a company that is related in that venture, then that company is also likely to have contracts with the domestic sporting organisation or an international sporting organisation that they can then use to indemnify their loss. We see this most present in things like the host city contract that the Olympics has for 2024 and subsequent years. These litigious matters put financial pressure upon these organisations to change and therefore regulate their behaviour, thereby restricting their autonomy. Even the Court of Arbitration of Sport comments on matters like these. In 2014, the CAS determined the case of Judy Chand. They found that the World Athletics Organization, the IAAF, that their hyperandrogenism regulations that only applied to female athletes were discriminatory. They ordered the IAAF to change these regulations, thereby changing its internal rules. Finally, things like media and watchdog organizations like Human Rights Watch are able to put collective pressure upon these organizations to change in the form of boycotts, but also things like call out media campaigns. Now, my learned friends may submit that this is not reducing the autonomy of the organization, because at the end of the day, that organization is still consenting to these changes and making those changes. We would respond to this claim by stating that the restrictions of options in of itself is the restriction of one's freedom and thus one's autonomy. This is most present in the example of boycotts. Boycotts are an imposition of one's autonomy, and many jurisdictions recognize this through regulating the type of boycotts that are legal within their jurisdiction. An extreme example that demonstrates this principle is a group of people boycotting Black businesses. They are obviously impeding the autonomy of that business. They are attempting to force a particular outcome from those companies. Similarly, for example, Indian fans boycotting a Pakistani cricket organization is similarly unjustified. Why should the various stakeholders whose hopes and dreams and futures that are bound up with that sport organization be held hostage by geopolitical whims? In conclusion, this is why there must be a well-established principle of autonomy for sporting organizations, and why stricter enforcement will necessarily impede this principle. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your submission. In the position against the debate team of University of Antioquia, you have 4 minutes. Whenever you're ready.
First, may I confirm if I'm audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. We express gratitude to organizing team of the Correct Foundation for hosting us and to our colleagues from Monash University for sharing this experience with all of us. Today, we present to you arguments based on international law instruments according to the statement, the strict enforcement of human rights in sports may not impede the autonomy of sports. In order to discuss, I will present a general point of view about the importance of human rights inside sport competition. Then, my teammate Valeria will bring to the discussion relevant points about the organization sports responsibility, ethical and moral. To conclude, my teammate Michelle will share with us the problem about abuse and exploitation of the youngest athletes. Let's start from the idea that the right to sport is a fundamental human right contained in the International Charter of Physical Education, Physical Activity and Sport. In this sense, as mentioned by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime Program in its reports on corruption in sports, it is a human right that is connected to other rights, such as human dignity, equality, freedom of thought, and the free development of personality, to mention only those contained in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which are also fundamental for any human being. Hence, the autonomy of sports organizations should intertwine with the safeguarding of human rights. This assertion is grounded in the foundational premise that human rights are indivisible and inalienable, as retired in historical documents such as the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The establishment and operation of these organizations are fundamentally rooted in the recognition that human rights are foundational. Therefore, sports organizations, in exercising their autonomy, have the capacity and responsibility to actively promote human rights through their own internal policies and regulations. For this reason, we reach our first conclusion, which develops around the fact that stating that human rights limit sports autonomy is a biased view that overlooks the fact that both objectives can mutually reinforce each other. On the other hand, it is necessary to mention that a lax approach to human rights regulation not only risks creating sports monopolies, but also violates competitions and free market rules set by the World Trade Organization. This unbridled exercise of autonomy undermines key principles mandated by international sports law, FIFA, UEFA, the Olympic Charter resolutions, potentially jeopardizing athletes' right to fair employment opportunities, the right to work, and the right to free association, rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. An example of what has been mentioned is the International Olympic Committee authorized that Russian and Belarusian athletes could participate under a neutral flag and only in individual competitions in the 2024 Olympic Games. This demonstrates that in most of the cases, the athletes are subject to strict conditions because of how sports organizations manipulate the competition for reason of political interests, which shouldn't be a main concern related to the fundamental right of sports. In line with insight from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes Global Report on Corruption in Sports and the European Commission White Paper on Sports. To conclude, I like to quote Mr. Saif Al-Hussein. We can collaborate in solving the most delicate issues and achieve a future where we work together to promote sport lies at the very core of what it means to be a human. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your submission. We have now concluded the opening statements and are entering rebuttals, starting with the debate team in favor, Monash University, whenever you're ready.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Sports organizations are quite funny for someone that doesn't follow sports. Because sports bodies are really obsessed with rules and regulations, but hate being ruled and regulated. What we think here is that our opponents have missed the topic because what is relevant is the fact that private international law remains the most important way of ensuring sports governance is something that is plausible. The problem with the vast majority of the evidence provided by the first speaker of the other side is that it very much relied on public international law norms, but doesn't explain why those norms ought carry over into the realm of sports governance, which is largely run by private international law. What does that private international law look like? We would submit that private international law looks like the extensive use of the Swiss law and its jurisdiction to arbitrate conflicts, because the Swiss Supreme Court is the appeals body of the Court of Arbitration of Sport. We would note that as a result of that, much of the way that human rights can be enforced is through contractual agreements that those sporting organizations get themselves into. This is why what Michael tells you in first speaker is so important. It is because Michael tells you that there is escalating pressure such that all these sporting organizations have been feeling more and more compelled to reduce their autonomy due to all these boycotts and because of these lawsuits from those contractual agreements and their clauses that incorporate international law treaties. As a result of that, we think that with any form of stricter enforcement, you create massive legal liability for these sports organizations as a whole, and that impairs their autonomy. For these reasons, we propose.
Thank you very much for your submission. Starting with the rebuttal for the opposing side, the B team of University of Antioquia, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. May I confirm that I'm audible and visible, please?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I appreciate the arguments put forward by the opposing team, but respectfully, we find ourselves in disagreement due to the fact that our colleagues explained that human rights restrict autonomy for no reason. Allow me to illustrate the importance of talk about human rights regulations. This truth an example. The Court of Justice of the European Union ruled on the dangers of sports organizations having excessive autonomy when in 2021, a competition project independent of the UEFA and FIFA sports organizations called the European Super League was presented by several sports clubs on the continent as a closed competition. However, UEFA, backed by FIFA, was making threats such as imposing economic sanctions and take away the club's licenses in case the tournament was held, reason for which it was not carried out. Sometime later, more precisely during mid-2023, the Court of Justice of the European Union explained that both sports organizations exercise a dominant abuse by vetoing the Super League. That because even outside the UEFA and FIFA systems, all kinds of soccer competitions can be created according to the competition principles of the European Union. This led us to argue that it's necessary to talk about the ethical and moral responsibility of sports organizations, since the lack of strict regulation of human rights leads not only to the possible creation of sports monopolies, but also to the violation of competition and free market rules of the World Trade Organizations. This represents an excessive exercise of their autonomy, potentially compromising essential principles of transparency, objectivity, and proportionality mandated by international sports law, as well as by FIFA, UEFA, the Olympic Charter, and the World Trade Organization's own regulations. Ultimately, such unregulated actions may result in a failure to respect athletes' rights to fair employment opportunities, to right to work, and to the right to free association as contained in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission. For the second rebuttal in favor, debate team of Monash University, you have 2 minutes.
I'd like to thank my learned friends for their arguments. However, it seems that they have a contradiction between their two speakers. At their first speaker, they stated that sports and human rights are compatible and therefore not restricting one's autonomy is because the sports organizations can collaborate with the rest of the international order. But it was unclear how there were mechanisms of collaboration occurring under the status quo. And the truth was that there's no means to actually constrain the autonomy of these organizations, but through litigious matters or court rulings. This is why the second speaker's submission on the point about the European case trial that we're talking about is a prime example of how stricter enforcement of human rights is impeding the autonomy of sporting organizations, ruling that they have too much autonomy under the status quo. This is by no means a collaborative approach, but an enforcement approach that necessarily impedes the actions of that sporting organisation. The reality is human rights enforcement should be occurring through other means, through ground root support within domestic countries to change the hearts and minds of those citizens. And all these, thank you.
All right, thank you for your submission. For the second rebuttal in the position against the debating of University of Antioquia, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. May I confirm that I am visible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Firstly, I would like to thank the opposing team for presenting their arguments, but once again, we must respectfully disagree with the argument presented by Mr. Tan about organizations' autonomy is being limited, when the opposite occurs, since the objective is to watch that autonomy, to not allow human rights to be violated, as happens with children's rights. We must keep in mind that a stricter application of human rights is needed in sport organizations to protect young athletes from abuse and exploitation. Although the autonomy of such organizations is important, it cannot justify violations of fundamental rights and well-being of children, which clearly goes against the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Child exploitation in sport is a serious and ongoing problem. As evidenced by data from UNICEF, Human Rights Watch, children around the world are being subjected to extreme training, experiencing physical and psychological abuse, and even being trafficked under false promises. According to a study by the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, between June 2016 and March 2020, out of 3,939 cases of sexual abuse reported, 64 cases were inside a sport context, and 91% of these cases have been sexually abused by a coach or volunteer from a sport organization. Sport organizations themselves are obligated to ensure and respect children's rights. However, they often ignore this obligation, as sentences by the Supreme Court of Michigan evidence the mentioned before, with the ex-Olympic athletes that sued the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee and also the FBI because of the sexual abuse committed on them. So, in conclusion, sport should promote positive values, not serve as a vehicle for violations against the most vulnerable. Protecting basic human rights cannot be considered an undue interference with the autonomy of sport. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your submission. This now concludes rebuttals. We are entering conclusions. The debate team of Monash University, you have 2 minutes for your conclusion.
I will discuss 2 main questions that I think are relevant for deciding who wins this debate. The first of which is, what kinds of rights will be enforced and how will it be enforced? The second relevant question becomes, will this then actually impair the autonomy of sports organizations? Turning to the first question. Now, the entirety of our opponent's case is largely rested on the rights of athletes, perhaps with some young people as well, with children, with respect to their participation in sport, because the entire case is predicated on the right to participate fairly in sport. But this is contrary to existing trends of escalating demands for going beyond the purview of enforcing human rights within sport for young athletes or for adult athletes, right? You see a lot of escalating demands for queer rights in the Qatar FIFA World Cup. You saw massive calls for justice for the Xinjiang Uyghur Muslims in China when the Beijing Summer Olympics was happening in 2022. The reality is that any form of stricter enforcement measures have not been demonstrated to be likely to exist and likely to succeed on the side of the negating team in this debate. Our opponents also brought up that the European Union Court actually bothers to care about human rights. But the thing is that the Swiss Supreme Court, in the case of Semenya, was found by the European Court of Human Rights to have a duty to protect human rights as enumerated by the European Convention of Human Rights. This means, ultimately, there's a massive restriction at the end of the day, and in any form that they've tried to basically enforce any of the rights that they've claimed to stand for. The second thing I would note on the second issue is basically that they had to defend stricter enforcement. They have a burden on the opponent's team to prove what else they'll do to defend or protect those rights. But they've not exactly told us the different alternative mechanisms for stricter enforcement and how that will not impede autonomy. What we told you is that it's important to recognize those rights are being exploited, but use only the existing channels that do not impede autonomy. For those reasons, we propose.
Thank you very much for your submission. The debate team of University of Antioquia, you have 2 minutes for your conclusion.
Thank you so much to our colleagues in Melbourne and all the team in The Hague. It has been a pleasure having this debate. And we would like that the judges please consider the arguments we have presented against the statement during this debate. First, as my teammate Melissa mentioned, human rights which are indivisible and inalienable are intrinsically related to sporting activity, such that the action of sports organizations cannot be viewed from any other legal perspective. In addition to that, the excessive autonomy of sports organizations has generated serious violations of rights and scenarios of abuse and corruption. Second, the absence of strict regulation of human rights in this area can lead to the creation of sports monopolies, as well as to sports organizations ignoring their ethical and moral responsibility, allowing them to generate damage to integrity of the sports market and compromising the main principles of sports competitions. Finally, in accordance with what has been said by my teammate Michelle, stricter enforcement of human rights is necessary in sports organizations to safeguard young athletes from abuse and child exploitation, violating the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which mandates their protection, generating that sports, instead of promoting positive principles, become the exploitation of the most defenseless. In conclusion, a stricter enforcement of human rights in sports may not impede the autonomy of sports organizations. On the contrary, it responds to the need to limit the ravage of the excesses of autonomy, which have generated inequalities in all spheres of sports. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your submission. This now concludes the official part of the match. You can relax. You will no longer be graded after this part. We'll do a little feedback round, so just to take a breather, take a sip of water. Really well done from the side of organizers. Congratulations on your first match, and thank you for the opening of the round 1 of the competition. So, on the side of organizing team, we usually ask you a few questions. Namely, you can focus in your feedback on how you prepared for the match, whether or not this was already a topic you encountered before in your studies, or even perhaps if you heard the opposing team's arguments in your own preparation for that side of the debate. So, starting perhaps with Ms. Melissa Ordóñez, how did you find this match?
It was great. It was really, really great. I like it a lot that we have to debate with such wonderful persons that are really prepared, and it shows. It was really great that we have a lot of common on our arguments, even if it was not in favor or against. And we have a lot of cases that we tried to put on the other arguments that, because we didn't have the opportunity to be in the in favor part, we didn't show, but it was really great.
Thank you very much. From Monash University, Mr. Tan, how did you find the match? Did you perhaps hear opposing sides saying arguments you prepared for your own side?
I really enjoyed the match. I think it seemed like we had done similar levels of preparation. This area of international sporting law is quite new to me, and I found the topic was good for that, like incentivize the research into that area, which I found really interesting. Because I've always wondered how these types of international sporting bodies were regulated. Yeah, and it was quite enjoyable. It was a great debate.
Thank you very much. Ms. Barbosa, how did you find the match? This is perhaps a topic you've already experienced in studies?
Okay. No, I think that this is a really great experience. I hadn't like had something like this, and I think that it has been an enrichment for we all three, and of course for the University of Monash. Because in my case, I think that I learned a lot of international law, specifically in sports. And I can tell that at first it was a little bit difficult because of all the interpretations that we all had. But at the end, I think that we all did a really good job, and I'm really happy for that.
Thank you. From Australia, Mr. Law, how did you find the debate? Is this something you've already seen in your studies when it comes to the topic?
No, so I have not seen this in my studies. I quite enjoyed the process of preparing and doing this debate. The reason is because I've done similar debates like this, but not in a legal context, but in the varsity debating context. And this particular topic in question comes out in many different forms. So, for example, for the Australasian InterVarsity Debating Championship that I was at, I set the topic that basically around Qatar's human rights violations and what the international community should do it. I think the challenge for me coming in from the varsity debating circuit is the way that the motions are being phrased, because they are a little bit foreign to the way that is the convention used for the global English debating community at the very least, because most motions would start with "this house believes that" or "this house would XYZ," and would generally not use the terms such as may or might. So I guess the most interesting thing for me coming in is learning the different conventions that are being used by other debating circuits globally.
Thank you very much. It's quite interesting to hear about your experience at the debate stage. That's, believe that will come in handy for your team, but also for the other teams that meet you during the competition to also learn something from you. Thank you for sharing. Ms. Vasquez, what about you? How did you find the match?
It was a really pleasure to be here debating with our colleagues from Melbourne, and it was very interesting. It is very enriching to see how they interpreted the statement. And as my teammate Melissa told us, we find some arguments so similar. So it was like so enriching for us.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for the sharing. And once again, from the side of organizing team, really one big congratulations. And thank you for the opening match of the first round of 2024 edition. There is one final thing we usually ask the teams. Of course, you will be having a chance to meet again during the mid-competition event, which will be in April, when you will also find out which teams make it into the next stage. But already you have one team and 2 familiar faces and 3 familiar faces for the other team to recognize when you go there. So perhaps, is there anything you would like to share with the other team about your university or perhaps about your town where you study? Of if they were to come and visit, what they might experience or what they definitely should not miss. Maybe the team from Colombia?
If you want to come to University of Antioquia, it will be a pleasure. We will meet you, and you are going to have a really great experience here because there is a lot of biodiversity. In Colombia, we have this expression that is el pulmón de Medellín, that it means the lung of Medellín. Is based on where is the University of Antioquia, so maybe you can meet that. It will be great.
Yeah, I was gonna say, oh, sorry, Anne-Marie.
No.
I'm planning on doing a lot of travel this year. So I might actually go to Colombia because there's a sport that I do called street workout that's pretty big over in Colombia. But you guys should definitely come to Melbourne if you ever get the chance. This is where Joel and I are based. Melbourne's pretty cool. It's a bit like of a hipster town. There's a lot going on. The weather changes a lot, but I mean, that's great. You get 4 seasons in one day, as they say. And obviously, because it's Australia, you know, you're surrounded by kangaroos, wombats, koalas, which is, you know, great fun.
Right. So, know a bit more. Maybe Mr. Tan will be reaching out to the team when he arrives to Colombia. I already know from the past editions, several teams are still in contact, I believe, to this day. So definitely take the opportunity to reconnect, definitely during the mid-competition event, and maybe also outside of the official channels. Well done. Within the 2 business days, we'll be collecting the forms from the judges. And once we process them and confirm the scores, you will be given the forms and as well any feedback that the judges might wish to share with you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you also everyone on YouTube joining us, and also for the judges that will be watching this later. Well done, and have a good weekend, everyone.
Congratulations, a good weekend over there. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.